So, Clive, I've been in this industry, 33 years. I set up Landlord Action 23 years ago. I've never seen a rental stock crisis that we're in at the moment. We've not just got temporary accommodation crisis and a social housing crisis. We now have a crisis in the private rental sector where landlords are leaving in their droves. I mean, last year there was 153,000 landlords or properties that were sold in the private rental sector. It's amalgamation of years of failing, really. I mean, obviously, the private rental sector stands about 20% at the moment, but you've got an average now about 20 to 30 tenants viewing and fighting over a property. But landlords are leaving, Clive, because there was a taxation that came in where landlords get taxed on turnover rather than profit.
Mm.
And that was a big hit. That came in by George Osborne in 2017. Then what happened was, and let's be honest, landlords have had it really good, and a lot of homeowners have had it really good for a long time because interest rates were nothing. And then, of course, Liz Truss came in with a mini budget, and that was a complete shambles. And then, of course, you've got now landlords, or that were on 2 or 3%, and now they're paying 6, 7% on their fixed terms have come to an end. I know one landlord who actually goes to my gym. I train with him, and he was paying £350 a month. His mortgage has gone up to £1150 a month, and of course, those costs are going on to tenants paying much more rents, where historically landlords weren't putting rents up, but some landlords are just saying, you know what, I'm getting out. And then, of course, there's all the regulation coming in, the Renters Reform Bill, which has got some of the biggest changes in 30 years, the abolishment of Section 21. And then, of course, there's electrical performance certificates. EPCs have got to be up to level C to 2028. So it's been amalgamation of a lot of things, and of course a lot of landlords are getting older and property management is difficult. But of course it's not just good tenants, it's bad tenants maybe being evicted, when they're not paying the rent. And we're seeing people that are falling on hard times because of the cost of living crisis. But you've got a tenant paying 35-40% of their wages towards rent. It's really, really tough on tenants.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, from what you're saying, it's a lot of landlords are in difficulties and a lot of tenants are in difficulties. And you have to say, well, it is like, as you're describing, a bit of a perfect storm of different things. But you mentioned the government policy, the taxation and all of that. It feels like this government has almost got it in for small landlords, that they've made everything as difficult as possible. Do you think that is deliberate?
Yeah, I think it could be delivered. I mean, look, the reality is we're looking at a Labour government coming in next year. And, there's talk about rent caps possibly coming on the table. And, Lisa Nandy, who's now obviously the shadow housing secretary, she's been talking about giving power back to the mayors of various cities, with regard to bringing that in. I think it's been amalgamation, of a lot of things, Clive. Every government says we need to be 400,000 properties a year. We have a larger migration, people coming into the country. And then, of course, the problem you're going to have is going to be the more vulnerable tenants trying to find accommodation. You've got average waiting times of council waiting lists of 15, 20, 25, 30 years. Impossible to be rehoused by the council because they haven't built for years. And then what happened was a lot of people trying to fight in, other private tenants in the private rental sector. And, of course, what doesn't help with regard to the more vulnerable tenants on local housing allowance, that housing allowance cap has been frozen for ages until April 2024, and that hasn't kept up with rents. I mean, some other stats that have come in. At the moment, you've got landlords' mortgage arrears that have increased in the last 3 months by 28% to landlords. So it's landlords and tenants struggling. And of course, if you're getting, you might have a good tenant that's been at a property for a number of years. A landlord may not have put the rent up, but of course, if they're going to sell the property, they have to serve notice on the tenant. They want their property back, which is vacant, so they can sell the property. And then obviously, the house prices have been crazy over the last few years. So it has been a perfect storm, and I really worry. Actually, I just think I've never seen anything like it. And like I said, I'm a veteran in this industry.
I mean, I suppose there might be some people looking at this and thinking, well, is this definitely bad news? Because anyone trying to be a first-time buyer, for example, there's more properties on the market for them because landlords are selling up and people are buying. So I
Mm.
mean, there's less to rent, but there's presumably more to buy as a result.
Well, you say that. I mean, renting now is now cheaper than mortgages. Never used to be, only until very, very recently, because obviously
Yes.
mortgages shot up. But let me put this in perspective. You know, affordability of home ownership in London, you need over £100,000 a year income to be able to have a deposit of £140,000 to put down. It's fortunes,
Yeah.
absolute fortunes. So I know, obviously, London's not like the rest of the country, but yes, there is going to be opportunities for first-time buyers. But I think if you look at the market at the moment, there's definitely investors and first-time buyers are watching and waiting. The market was too hot, because everyone's worried about the interest rate. Where is it going to level up? Could it go up to 6%? And then drop down after a couple of years in a couple of years' time. So people are watching and waiting. I mean, the market has called. It had to call in reality, but we have a severe housing shortage across the board.
Do you think we're going to end up mainly with big landlords then, big companies, and the small landlords are gradually going to drift away?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, I mean, 8% of landlords have over 20 properties. I mean, look, 85% have got, effectively have three or less. Those landlords are selling up without a doubt. I mean, look, I run landlord action, and 60% of our instructions relate to landlords being wanting to serve notice just to get their properties back. And we ask them, the staff ask them, why do you want possession of your property back? It used to be actually rent arrears mainly, or antisocial behaviour. But it's now, I want to sell my property. And of course, you've also got another perfect storm coming up further down the line with the Renters Reform Bill, where there's a 12-point plan to give the tenants greater security, to make sure that properties are up to a higher standard in the private rental sector. But when the Section 21, which is a 2-month notice to end the contract, is abolished in a couple of years' time, you'll see a further landlord panic, because I can tell you now, and we haven't touched on it now, but I can tell you now the courts are the worst they've ever been as well. The delays in the courts and getting hearings. So landlords, I mean, we're waiting for. There's one case. Actually in London. We're waiting 7 months for an eviction date. And I think the rent arrears are something like 19 months, where the landlord hasn't had the rent paid. And I think the reality is, these smaller landlords, they're not multi-millionaires; they're just normal people. But I think a lot of them are having enough and now looking to sell up.
And some of these tenants, then, are they people who've genuinely hit hard times? They can't afford the rent, and that's why they're being evicted, or are they really bad tenants who are playing a game and taking the pee?
It's all the above, Clive. So, you've got tenants that have fallen on hard times. Everything's gone up. Costs on everything's gone up. Rents have been pushed up because landlords' mortgages have been pushed up. And then, of course, you've got tenants that play the game, that know the system, that will just sit tight, wait on court delays, and then leave a day before, or put sham defences at court. And then, of course, you have, the subletting scams that happen. You have tenants that are being told by the councils to stay put so they can be rehoused by the council. It's lots and lots and lots of different reasons why tenants aren't paying the rent. We say a bad tenant, but obviously it could be a tenant that's fallen on times. It could be a tenant that's benefits have stopped for various different reasons. And of course, we can have a whole different conversation, Clive, when it comes to universal credit and direct payment and the mess that system is as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects to this. You mentioned the Section 21 and being able to get get people out within 2 months. Now, some people will be listening to this and thinking, well, people should have more stability. Why should you, for no reason, be able to just get somebody out with 2 months' notice? I mean, what would your answer be to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the abolishment of Section 21 is happening. Okay, tenancies will not have fixed terms; they'd be periodic, month to month. So there is an argument to say, well, actually, on a month to month, is that giving a tenant greater security? It's especially going to be an issue in the student in private student housing, because obviously you can't put a set time on it. You've got to strengthen the grounds of Section 8, which is the ground. So if you want to sell your property and move back in, that will be a ground. You need more mandatory grounds, but you need more mediation, you need more judging, you need more bailiffs, you need to make sure there's more investment in digital performance in the courts as well. But the problem is, it's about confidence, isn't it? Landlord confidence is most probably at an all-time low. And if you have an all-time low in confidence, landlords get out the market. And what does that mean? It means that good tenants are being told to leave the properties. So, there's so many complex factors to all of this. I think the tenant organisations need to be working better with landlords. I don't think there's some really good landlords out there that really care about their tenants. There's some really bad landlords as well. We expose them on the TV program, but I really feel for tenants at the moment because it is really really challenging. Because of course rents are going up, and I train letting agents, Clive, regularly all over the country, and I spoke to one letting agent, and they had, I think it was 82 applicants for one property.
Mm.
They had an open house viewing.
I mean, where do you even start with that? On what basis can they? You do all the normal checks and you're still left with 50 people. Is it just lucky dip, or how do they do it?
Well, I do remind landlords, and I reminded landlords yesterday when I was in Manchester doing a talk for the National Residential Landlord Association. Actually, as landlords, you're actually getting the pick of better tenants than ever before. You have to qualify them. And some, tenants are trying to bid against each other. And of course, there's less void periods of empty property. But I mean, for a tenant, it's really, really challenging. But what I'm saying to you is, if you keep demonising landlords, it's just prodding the bear a little bit more. And of course, it must be really stressful for a tenant, getting a text from the landlord because they're worried the landlord's going to be selling and that has been the trend at the moment because of course, if you're a good tenant paying your rent, looking after the property for no fault of your own, you're being asked to leave the property, it can be really stressful. So I understand why Section 21 is being abolished, and it is being abolished, but you need to have confidence there. But that's not going to happen for a couple of years for Section 21, the 2-month notice to be abolished. I mean, and then of course there is an issue, of course, with antisocial behaviour as well, and how you get a tenant out, and that's been increasing. So, yeah, it's complex, very complex, Clive.